Betrayal doesn't hit you all at once. It seeps in, creeping under your skin like a slow poison, numbing you before it finally crushes you. That evening, I pulled into my driveway expecting a quiet home, a warm dinner, maybe even a kiss from my wife. Instead, I found his car. A sleek black BMW sat there like a monument to something I wasn't supposed to see. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. That car didn't belong here. It wasn't Madeline's. It wasn't mine. And it sure as hell wasn't some random visitor's. A sharp pulse of adrenaline shot through me, but I swallowed it down. No need to jump to conclusions. Maybe she had a friend over. Maybe it was a delivery guy. Maybe. No. Deep down, I already knew. I stepped out of my car, my legs suddenly heavier than they should have been. The house was too quiet. No TV murmuring in the background, no soft hum of music, just an eerie stillness that set every nerve on edge. Then I heard it. A voice. Hers. I can't wait to see you tonight, baby. It's going to be amazing. My feet froze. My breath stalled in my chest. There was a laugh, soft, teasing. A sound I hadn't heard from her in a long time. I moved inside, closing the door carefully behind me. My fingers felt numb as I set my briefcase down by the entrance. The air was thick, suffocating. Every step forward felt like walking into quicksand. At the bottom of the stairs, I stopped. The words floated down from our bedroom, each syllable cutting deeper than the last. I'll leave in an hour. Should give us plenty of time before I have to get back. My world tilted. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted this to be some bizarre misunderstanding. But every instinct screamed the truth at me. I climbed the stairs slowly, deliberately. Each creak of the floorboards sounded like a gunshot in the silence. The door to our bedroom was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. She sat on the edge of the bed, phone pressed to her ear, a coy smile on her lips, the kind of smile she used to give me. Madeline. Her head snapped toward me. The phone slipped from her fingers onto the bed. Shock. Panic. And then something colder. Not guilt. Annoyance. Owen, she breathed. I thought you weren't coming home until tomorrow. Her voice was too calm. Too calculated. I took a step closer, my pulse hammering in my ears. Clearly, the air between us stretched tight like a wire about to snap. I looked into my wife's eyes, searching for any trace of remorse. Any flicker of the woman I thought I knew. All I saw was a stranger. Who were you talking to? My voice came out quieter than I expected. Madeline blinked, but she didn't panic. Instead, she exhaled sharply and stood up, crossing her arms. That's none of your business. I let out a breathless laugh, rubbing my jaw. None of my. I shook my head. You're my wife. How the hell is this none of my business? She rolled her eyes. Rolled her damn eyes. Oh, grow up, Owen, she said, her voice laced with exasperation. Did you really think I was going to spend the rest of my life trapped in this boring, predictable marriage? I stepped back like she had physically struck me. What are you saying? She shrugged. I'm saying I've found someone who actually excites me. Someone who isn't so safe. Her words sliced through me like a blade. You're having an affair. She didn't even hesitate. No, she said, smiling slightly. Affairs are for people who feel guilty. I don't. I swallowed, trying to force down the sickness rising in my gut. You can't be serious. She laughed, tilting her head. Oh, I'm very serious. And tonight? I'm embracing him. A cold, unfamiliar rage settled into my bones. If you walk out that door, Madeline, I said, my voice dangerously low, we're done. Our marriage is over. She picked up her purse from the dresser, slung it over her shoulder. She didn't look sad. She didn't hesitate. Maybe, she said, arching a brow, you should have made those 14 years count for something. Then she was gone. The front door slammed. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. And just like that, my life as I knew it was over. I stood frozen in the middle of the bedroom, the silence suffocating. It didn't make sense. We weren't perfect, but I never thought we were this broken. When had she started resenting me? When had she decided that I wasn't enough? I dropped onto the bed, my hands running over my face, trying to force myself to think. I should have fought harder. I should have screamed at her, demanded an explanation, forced her to admit that she was destroying everything we built together. But she had been so indifferent. That hurt more than anything. The sound of an engine roaring to life outside snapped me out of my trance. I rushed to the window just in time to see the BMW pull away. I wanted to run after it, chase it down, drag her back inside and make her explain why she was throwing 14 years away like they meant nothing. But I didn't. I just stood there, staring at the taillights disappearing down the street, my hands trembling at my sides. Everything was different now. I just didn't know how much yet. I sat there for a long time. Too long. The whiskey burned my throat, but I barely felt it. The house felt different now. Empty, even though everything was still in its place. The furniture, the framed pictures on the walls, the smell of her perfume lingering in the air. Everything looked the same, but it wasn't. She wasn't. I stared at the ring on the kitchen counter. Her ring. She had left it right next to her keys. Carefully. Deliberately. Like a final statement. I reached out, picking it up between my fingers. It felt so damn small. Light. Meaningless. 14 years. Just gone. I should have thrown it. Should have crushed it beneath my heel. But instead, I just turned it over in my palm, rubbing my thumb against the smooth gold band. I thought about the day I had slipped it onto her finger, the way her hands trembled, the way her eyes shone with tears. "I love you," she had whispered that day. I closed my eyes. That version of her, of us, felt like a lifetime ago. Like a dream I had woken up from far too late. The whiskey wasn't helping. Nothing was. So I grabbed my phone and called Brian. "Owen." His voice was groggy, thick with sleep. "What's wrong?" I swallowed. My mouth was dry. "She's gone." There was a beat of silence. Then shit. "Yeah." I ran a hand through my hair, gripping the back of my neck. "How long did you know?" Brian hesitated. I could hear the guilt before he even spoke. "A few months." His voice was quiet. A sharp breath left me. "A few months. And you didn't tell me?" "I wanted to," Brian admitted. "But I kept hoping I was wrong. That she'd come to her senses. That she'd fix things before it got to this." I pressed my fingers against my eyes, forcing back the headache creeping in. "I deserve to know." "I know, man." His voice softened. "I'm sorry." I didn't respond. I couldn't. After a moment, Brian cleared his throat. "Look, what do you need? A place to crash? Someone to get drunk with?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Already working on that second one." Brian sighed. "Owen, don't let this wreck you." "Too late," I muttered. I could hear him shifting in bed. "Who is he?" I asked before he could say anything else. Another pause. Then, Liam Harrington. The name barely registered at first. Then, like a slow, sinking weight, it hit. I knew him. I had met him. Shaken his hand. He had smiled at me. Looked me in the eye. The room swayed for a moment. My grip tightened around the phone. "You sure?" Brian exhaled. "Yeah, man. I'm sure." A sharp, bitter taste filled my mouth. I forced it down. "I need to go." "Owen." I ended the call. And for the first time since she walked out that door, I felt something. Not sadness. Not heartbreak. Rage. I didn't sleep. The night blurred into morning, my mind too full, too loud. I spent hours digging, through bank statements, credit card transactions, phone logs. I needed to know everything. And what I found made my stomach churn. She hadn't just cheated on me. She had used our money to do it. Dinners at expensive restaurants. Weekend getaways. Hotel stays. Months. Maybe years. I couldn't breathe. I felt sick. She had been using our life, our home, to build something new with someone else. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. I had spent so much time wondering what I had done wrong, wondering why I wasn't enough. But this wasn't about me. This was about her. Her choices. Her selfishness. My jaw locked as I grabbed my phone and called Brian again. He picked up on the second ring. "Owen, I need a lawyer." There was a long pause. Then, "I'll set up a meeting." I exhaled, staring at the wall. "Thanks." Brian hesitated. "And Owen?" "Yeah. I know it doesn't feel like it now, but you're gonna get through this." I let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "Almost." "Sure," I said, but I didn't believe it. Not yet. By noon, I was sitting in Jason Miller's office, a divorce lawyer Brian had recommended. He scanned the documents I had brought, flipping through them with a practiced eye. "Well," he said finally, leaning back in his chair. "She's in deep shit." A humorless smile tugged at my lips. "Good." Jason tapped the paperwork. "She's been using joint marital assets to fund her affair. That's financial misconduct. It gives us a strong case in court." "What about the house?" I asked. "If we prove misconduct, you could keep it. Or we could negotiate a higher settlement in your favor." I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. "She won't see this coming." Jason smirked. "That's exactly how we want it." I stood, shaking his hand. "Let's do it." I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Madeline thought she had won. She thought she had walked away clean, into the arms of someone else, leaving me behind like a relic of her old life. But she had underestimated me. I wasn't just going to sit back and let her take everything. I was going to fight back. And when she realized what was happening, it would already be too late. I woke up to the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. The sun was already up, spilling through the blinds in streaks of harsh, golden light. My body ached, a dull, heavy exhaustion weighing down my limbs. For a few precious seconds, I forgot. I forgot the night before. Forgot the ring she left behind. Forgot the way she had looked at me, like I was something beneath her, something pathetic and disposable. Then it all came crashing back. The bed felt too big, too empty. The other side of it was untouched, the blankets still neatly tucked in, like she had never really been there at all. I exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over my face. No, I couldn't do this. Couldn't just sit here, drowning in the weight of it all. I needed to move. I needed a plan. I forced myself up and headed for the shower. The cold water hit like a shock to my system, but it was what I needed. I stood under it longer than necessary, gripping the edges of the sink when I finally shut it off. My reflection stared back at me, hollow-eyed, unshaven, a man I barely recognized. I could almost hear Madeline's voice in my head, that dismissive scoff. Maybe you should have made those 14 years count for something. My jaw clenched. I had given her everything. And now, I was going to make damn sure she regretted taking me for granted. By mid-morning, I was in my home office, going through everything. Bank records, credit card statements, emails. The more I found, the worse it got. It wasn't just a fling. It wasn't some spur-of-the-moment mistake. She had planned this. There were hotel receipts going back almost a year. Expensive dinners, shopping sprees, charges in places she had never mentioned going. I clicked through my shared online banking account, my stomach twisting as I saw just how much she had spent. Our joint money, our savings, on him. Liam fucking Harrington. I had met him once. Shaken his hand. Had a beer with him at a company party while he smiled at me like I was some oblivious fool. My grip tightened around the mouse. She wasn't just a liar. She was a thief. I was halfway through combing through more transactions when my phone buzzed. It was Brian. You good? He asked as soon as I answered. No, I admitted. But I will be. A pause. I set up a meeting with Jason. He said he can see you tomorrow. Good. You want me to come with? I hesitated. No, I said finally. I need to do this on my own. Brian exhaled. All right. But Owen, don't do anything reckless. I didn't respond. Because honestly, I didn't know what I was going to do. The next morning, I was sitting in Jason Miller's office again, this time with a clearer mind. Jason glanced over the new documents I had brought, ones I had spent hours compiling. Damn, he muttered, flipping through them. This is substantial. I leaned forward. Can we use it? Jason smirked. Oh, we can do more than that. He tapped one of the bank statements. She's been using joint assets for personal gain. That's a violation in most divorce proceedings. With this, we can push for an unfavorable settlement for her. I nodded, the anger inside me finally sharpening into something useful. What about the house? With this evidence, you have a strong chance of keeping it. And Liam? Jason's smirk widened. Well, that depends. I raised an eyebrow. Do you want to ruin him too? I didn't even hesitate. Yes. I left Jason's office with clarity. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt in control. Madeline thought she had walked away clean, that she had left me broken, empty. She had no idea what was coming. That night, I drove past their hotel. I wasn't even sure why. Curiosity? Masochism? Or maybe I just wanted to see it for myself. The place where my wife had thrown away our life together. The parking lot was mostly empty. But there it was. His car. That sleek, black BMW. A wave of pure rage slammed into me. So intense I had to grip the steering wheel just to keep from acting on it. It would be so easy. So fucking easy to key it. Slash his tires. Break a window. But I didn't. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of knowing they had gotten to me. Instead, I pulled out my phone. And I took a picture. A picture of his car, parked right outside the hotel where my wife was cheating on me. Then, with a deep breath, I drove away. The next morning, I sent the picture to Jason. He called me immediately. Are you sure you want to use this? He asked. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. All right. Then let's make them regret this. By the end of the week, the divorce papers were served. And just like that, the game changed. Madeline called me that night. I let it ring. Then she called again, and again, until finally, I picked up. "What do you want, Madeline?" I asked, my voice colder than I had ever heard it. There was a pause. You actually went through with it?" A bitter laugh left me. "What did you think I was going to do? Wait for you to come crawling back?" "Owen," she started, her voice suddenly soft. "We need to talk." "No," I said. "We don't." She hesitated. "It doesn't have to be this way." I exhaled slowly, my grip tightening around the phone. "You made your choice, Madeline." She was quiet. Then, almost desperate, "It was a mistake." I closed my eyes. For a brief second, I let myself imagine it. Let myself pretend that those words actually meant something. But they didn't. Not anymore. "You should have thought about that before you walked out," I said. Then I hung up. And this time, I didn't look back. The first thing I noticed when I woke up was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that weighed on my chest, pressing down like an invisible force. The kind of silence that told me something was missing, something I'd never get back. Madeline was gone. And for the first time, I truly felt it. I rolled over in bed, instinctively reaching toward her side. But the sheets were cold. Untouched. Of course they were. She hadn't just left the house. She had left me. And no amount of sleep, alcohol, or denial was going to change that. I lay there for a while, staring at the ceiling. My body felt heavy, but my mind wouldn't stop moving. Maybe if I had been a better husband, she wouldn't have done this. Maybe if I had noticed sooner, I could have stopped it. Maybe if I had just... I clenched my jaw. No. That kind of thinking would eat me alive. I forced myself out of bed. The house felt different now, like it wasn't really mine anymore. Like I was a guest in my own life. I walked past the kitchen counter and saw her wedding ring still sitting there, exactly where she had left it. I picked it up again, rolling it between my fingers. 14 years. Gone in a single night. What the hell was I supposed to do now? I spent most of the morning pacing the house, replaying everything over and over in my head. Every moment, every conversation, every red flag I had ignored. She had been slipping away from me for a long time. I just hadn't wanted to see it. I made myself a cup of coffee, barely tasted it. Checked my phone, but there were no messages from her. Not that I expected any. But there was a message from Brian. "Hey, just checking in. Call me when you're up." I stared at it for a while before finally dialing his number. "Hey," he answered immediately. "You okay?" I let out a breath. "Not really." I figured. A pause. "You eat anything yet?" I almost laughed. "Does whiskey count?" He sighed. "I'll be over in 15. I didn't argue. When Brian showed up, he had two things, a bag of takeout and a look in his eyes that said he wasn't going to let me wallow. He dropped the food on the table and pulled out a chair. "Eat." I hesitated, but the smell of warm food made my stomach twist in hunger. I hadn't realized how long it had been since I had eaten anything. We sat in silence for a while. It was comfortable, in a way only long-time friendships could be. Brian didn't push. He just waited. Finally, I spoke. "She's contesting the divorce." Brian cursed under his breath. "Of course she is. She wants the house," I said, shaking my head. "After everything, she still wants more." Brian leaned back, crossing his arms. "What are you going to do?" I exhaled, rubbing my temples. "I met with Jason. He's filing the counterclaim today." Brian nodded. "Good." Then, after a moment, "But that's not all, is it?" I hesitated. "I found something." I pulled out my laptop and opened the files I had been collecting. I turned the screen toward Brian. His eyes scanned the documents. Then he let out a low whistle. "Holy shit." Yeah, Madeline and Liam hadn't just been sneaking around. They had been stealing, redirecting company funds, padding expense reports, covering their tracks with false invoices. It wasn't just infidelity. It was fraud. Brian leaned back in his chair. "You gonna report it?" I stared at the screen. The logical answer was yes. But some part of me, some twisted, broken part of me wanted her to know I had this information before she went down. I wanted her to feel it, to know that I had the power now. I exhaled. "Not yet." Brian smirked. "Damn, you're really gonna make her sweat." I didn't smile back. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about hurting her the way she had hurt me. It was about making her accountable. That night, I got the call I had been expecting. "Madeline." I let it ring twice before answering. "Owen," she breathed. "We need to talk." I leaned against the counter, staring at the ring she had left behind. "Do we?" A pause. "Please." I sighed. "Go ahead." She hesitated. "This doesn't have to be messy." I laughed. but there was no humor in it. Messy? You think this isn't already messy? I just want what's fair. My grip tightened around the phone. She was so good at this. Twisting reality. Making herself sound reasonable. You walked out, I said, keeping my voice calm. You made your choice. I know, she murmured. And Owen, I never meant to hurt you. I closed my eyes. If she had said that a week ago, maybe I would have believed her. Maybe I would have let her manipulate me into thinking I was partially to blame for this. But not anymore. You already did, I said quietly. She inhaled sharply. I just don't want to fight with you. Bullshit. I knew what she really wanted. She wanted me to back off. To settle. To let her walk away without consequences. I let the silence stretch. Then, finally, I said, I know about Liam. Her breath hitched. Owen. And I know about the money. Silence. I imagined her sitting there, her heart pounding, finally realizing that she wasn't in control anymore. I don't want to fight either, I said. So here's how this is going to go. I could feel her waiting, terrified of what I was about to say. You sign the divorce papers, I continued. You walk away with nothing. Or, we take this to court, and I make sure everyone knows what you and Liam did. Owen. I don't want to hear it, I cut her off. You wanted a new life? Fine. You just don't get to take pieces of mine with you. She exhaled, long and shaky. I knew her well enough to know she was calculating, weighing her options. You have 24 hours, I said. Then the deal is off the table. A long pause. Then, fine. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Goodbye, Madeline. And for the first time, it really felt like goodbye. I ended the call. Then, slowly, I picked up her wedding ring one last time. I turned it over in my palm, studying it, feeling the weight of it. Then I dropped it in a drawer and walked away. It wasn't mine to hold anymore. The hardest part wasn't losing her. It was losing who I thought she was. For 14 years, I built my life around a woman who no longer existed. Or maybe she never really had. Maybe I had just wanted to believe she was someone she wasn't. Someone good. Someone loyal. Someone who loved me the way I had loved her. But love doesn't just disappear overnight. It fades. It erodes, piece by piece, until one day, you wake up and realize there's nothing left. I just hadn't seen it happening. Or maybe I had, and I was too afraid to admit it. I met with Jason again that morning. She agreed to sign, he said, pushing a stack of papers toward me. I stared at them, the final pieces of our life together reduced to ink and legal jargon. That's it. My voice felt hollow. That's it, Jason confirmed. No settlement. No claims. She's walking away with nothing. I exhaled slowly. Madeline had fought so hard to win, to take from me. But in the end, she lost everything. So why didn't I feel any better? I picked up the pen, hovered over the signature line. Jason studied me. You don't have to rush this. Take your time. I shook my head. No, I didn't want more time. I wanted closure. So I signed. And just like that, we were over. That night, I found myself sitting on the floor of my living room, a half-empty beer in my hand, staring at the ceiling. It felt strange. No more lawyers. No more battles. No more waiting for the next blow to land. For the first time in weeks, there was nothing left to fight for. I should have felt victorious. But I didn't. I just felt tired. I reached for my phone before I even realized what I was doing. Scrolled through my contacts, stopping at her name. Madeline. I should delete it. I knew that. I should erase every piece of her from my life, the way she had so easily erased me. But instead, I just sat there, staring at the screen, my thumb hovering over her name. Would she even pick up? And if she did, what would I even say? I sighed and locked my phone, tossing it onto the couch. I didn't need to hear her voice. Not anymore. A week passed. Then another. Life moved forward, even if I wasn't sure I had. I went back to work. Stood in front of my students. Lectured about history like my entire world hadn't just collapsed. I told myself I was fine. That I was healing. But some nights, I'd wake up at 2 a.m., roll over in bed, and reach for someone who wasn't there. Some habits die hard. One evening, Brian showed up at my door with a six-pack and a knowing look. Get dressed, he said. I frowned. Why? Because you need to get the hell out of this house. I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck. I'm fine, Brian. You're not fine, he shot back. You're sitting in a house full of ghosts, drinking alone every night. It's been a month, Owen. It's time. Time for what? He smirked. Time to remember what life feels like without her. I stared at him for a long moment. Then, Finally, I grabbed my jacket. The bar was loud, crowded, alive. I had forgotten what that felt like. For weeks, my world had been nothing but lawyers and paperwork and silence. Now, there was music, laughter, the clinking of glasses, people who weren't carrying the weight of a broken marriage on their shoulders. It felt foreign. It felt good. Brian pushed a beer into my hand and smirked. See? Not so bad, right? I huffed a laugh. I guess. We talked. We drank. And for the first time in a long time, I laughed. Really laughed. I didn't realize how much I needed it until that moment. As the night wore on, I found myself sitting at the bar, absently swirling the drink in my glass. That's when I saw her. Not Madeline, but someone else. She was sitting a few stools down, blonde hair tucked behind her ear, fingers wrapped around a glass of whiskey. She caught me looking and raised an eyebrow. What? I blinked. Huh. You've been staring at me for like 5 minutes, she said, smirking slightly. Shit. I shook my head. Sorry. Just lost in thought. She tilted her head. Bad day. Bad year, I muttered. She chuckled. I hear that. For a moment, we just sat there, sipping our drinks in silence. Then she held out her hand. I'm Charlotte. I hesitated, then shook it. Owen. Nice to meet you, Owen. I nodded. Yeah, you too. I didn't fall in love that night. Hell, I didn't even ask for her number. But as I walked out of that bar, the night air cool against my skin, something felt different. Lighter. I wasn't healed. I wasn't over it. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking back. And maybe that was enough. The house was too quiet when I woke up the next morning. Not the heavy, suffocating silence I had been drowning in for weeks. This was different. Lighter. Like something had shifted. I sat up, rubbing my hands over my face, blinking against the sunlight spilling through the curtains. My head wasn't pounding. My chest wasn't tight. For the first time in months, I didn't wake up feeling like I was carrying a weight I couldn't put down. I exhaled slowly. Maybe I was finally letting go. I went for a run that morning. I hadn't done that in a long time. It used to be my thing. Early morning runs before work, before life had a chance to weigh me down. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped. Maybe when things with Madeline started falling apart. Maybe even before that. It felt strange at first, my legs protesting, my breath uneven. But after the first few blocks, my body settled into the rhythm. It was just me, the sound of my feet hitting the pavement, the cool morning air filling my lungs. For the first time in forever, my mind was quiet. I didn't think about her. I didn't think about him. I just ran. And when I finally stopped, hands on my knees, chest heaving, I felt alive. Later that day, I found myself standing in front of my closet. There was still a section filled with her things. A few dresses she had left behind. A pair of heels in the corner. The scent of her perfume faintly clinging to the fabric. I had been avoiding it. Avoiding this. But not anymore. I grabbed a box and started packing. Piece by piece, I took her out of my house. Out of my space. Out of my life. When I was done, I carried the box to my car, drove across town, and dropped it off at the donation center. I didn't call her. Didn't tell her to come pick it up. She had walked away. So now, I was doing the same. That night, I sat on the couch with a beer in my hand, staring at my phone. For weeks, I had dreaded looking at it. Every text, every email, every reminder of her had been like a punch to the gut. But now, I scrolled through my contacts until I found her name. I hovered over it for a second. Then I pressed delete. And just like that, she was gone. The next morning, I went back to work. My students didn't know everything that had happened, but they knew something had changed. Maybe they had seen it in the way I carried myself. Maybe it was in my voice, in the way I showed up for them again. Whatever it was, I could feel it too. Teaching had always been my passion. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like myself in that classroom again. One of my students, Michael, a quiet kid who rarely spoke, stayed after class that day. Hey, Mr. Sinclair? I looked up from my desk. Yeah. He hesitated, shifting his weight. I just wanted to say, I don't know what's going on, but you seem different lately. In a good way. I blinked, caught off guard. Oh, thanks, Michael. He nodded, then quickly grabbed his bag and left before I could say anything else. I sat there for a long time after he was gone. Different. In a good way. I let the words sink in. Maybe I really was coming out the other side. That weekend, Brian dragged me out again. This time, I didn't protest. We ended up at a rooftop bar downtown. It was packed, music pumping through the speakers, people laughing, drinking, living. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel out of place in the world. I felt like I was a part of it again. And then I saw her. Not Madeline, but Charlotte, the woman from the bar. She was sitting at the edge of the rooftop, sipping a cocktail, looking out over the city lights. I didn't think. I just walked over. She glanced up, eyebrows raised. Well, if it isn't the guy who stares at people in bars. I chuckled, leaning against the railing. That's me. She smirked. Owen, right. You remembered. She shrugged. You seemed interesting. I tilted my head. Interesting how? She took a slow sip of her drink before answering. You looked like someone who was trying to figure out how to start over. I stared at her, caught off guard. Then I let out a breathless laugh. Yeah, something like that. She studied me for a second. Then, with a small smile, she said, Well, have you figured it out yet? I thought about that for a moment. The running, the teaching, the fact that I had finally let go of her. I turned toward the city, taking in the lights, the sound of the world moving forward, with or without me. Then I looked back at Charlotte and smiled. I think I'm getting there. And for the first time, I actually meant it.